Hi, I'm Steve Barlow. This is the Humanised Workforce Future You podcast video, where we're talking about perceptions of the future, issues that we need to be aware of, and their role in a rapidly changing work and life environment.
Hi, I'm Craig Saffin. The Humanised Workforce Future You podcast series is focused on the key factors evolving to create a more humanised workforce and how people from all walks of life are creating their future selves.
Welcome to the Humanised Workforce Future You podcast. I'm Steve Barlow, and as always, I'm joined by Craig. How are you, Craig?
Good, thanks, Steve. Nice to see you.
And today we've got a special guest. We've got Weinand, who's joining us from Sydney. So welcome, Dita. And do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Hi, Steve, and hi, Craig. Yes, thank you. So as you might have picked up, a German name with a South African accent, now Australian, based here in Sydney. I've been here 22 years. Great to be here with you guys. I have been in leadership development probably all my life. Worked with young people in South Africa in a multiracial kind of context, developing leadership amongst young people at a very exciting time in South Africa. And then had an early midlife change, joined BMW and loved the German company and worked with kind of leadership development in a South African context, but a European company. Loved my German connections. And then, like many other South Africans, came to visit here and saw what a beautiful place it is and how different it is. We have a typical South African kind of scenario. And I've been involved in leadership development, training, executive coaching, organizational development, transformational kind of consulting ever since I've really been here.
That's quite a bit there, Dita. You sort of threw a lot of stuff in there, but when you dig in underneath it, it's quite a lot, isn't it? So I think a lot of the successful people we've interviewed are very good at being humble. So I think that's going to be something I'm going to have to work on with you, isn't it, to dig that out? But what I'd like to ask you about is the program you were talking about, developing young leaders in South Africa. Can you tell us a little bit about what constitutes a quality leadership program for young people to set them up for leadership roles in the future?
Well, Craig, it was really an opportunity, and I did that in various ways. It was with an organization called Scripture Union in South Africa. So it was bringing black and white kids together and just really giving them an opportunity to get to know each other, not as black or white, but as young people, and to look at the opportunities, developing skills. And I love what you say, the humanized workforce. It was kind of just treating each other as humans when there's been a lot of racial disharmony. And so it was giving them an opportunity to share life with each other and to explore what it is that you need to have a prospective future and to look at opportunities. I was involved in a kind of a youth development program that BMW organized, again, giving young people, and they were predominantly black, but not all black, just a hope for the future. And what do they needed to do to, do their maths and do their science and do their homework and look at opportunities. So a massive need but for young people to plan for the future and to really work at making those opportunities happen, and they needed help with that. So very exciting time.
It sounds like,
and it's exciting to see how some of those young people I had a Facebook connection. Well, I think it was a LinkedIn connection years later, a guy who's now a senior manager, a black young guy who's a senior manager in a manufacturing company in South Africa. And he said, Dita, thank you for believing in me and giving me an opportunity to I think it was like an apprenticeship. And I mean, he's now a very influential, successful businessman. So a real
that makes your job very rewarding, doesn't it? I think it sounds like I hesitate to paraphrase what you just said, but it sounds like you were trying to give these young people some structure and purpose and an ability to plan things out for their life. Would that be reasonable to say?
Yes. And to also prioritize, what it is that they need to focus on in order to be successful, to at careers maybe differently than they would, because parents didn't have the openness, the mindset, the background to really advise kids. So a lot of it was around career development and planning, and then providing opportunities, because the potential is there, the people are there.
Yeah. They're just quite often in life we just need a mentor at the right time, don't we? I think some of us have been
absolutely
lucky to have that, and we always remember it as an inflection in our careers, don't we? So if we move on then, and we're talking the whole theme that we've been working on at the moment in this podcast series is about the CEO and what's required of CEOs. Clearly, CEO a successful one has to be a leader. That's a no-brainer. But what do you think is based on those sorts of skills that you were teaching a long time ago? What do you think are the key things required for a successful modern CEO?
Craig and Steve, I think it's really the human side.
Right.
So I can just give another example. I was engaged by a CEO of a big healthcare company because he realized he was working with doctors. And so I was involved in running a program, a doctor development program for cardiologists and radiation oncologists. And he said, these are shareholders. They are key people within the business. They don't look after themselves. They are technical specialists. They need help. And I think, the CEO is not much different. And with the current work that I'm doing, it is just coming alongside CEOs and helping them in terms of what are some of their challenges that they're facing. And whether it's a doctor or whether it's a principal or whether it's a CEO, I think very similar situations where they need a sounding board and an opportunity to be themselves, to be vulnerable, to talk shop. And again, for me, what's been significant, what I loved about this work is, in actual fact, everybody has a story to tell. And the current work that I'm doing is we do quite a bit of work around family of origin and belief systems, and what's the subconscious, the deep internal work that's either preventing or supporting the leadership role that they might have. And it's just amazing that we are all human and we forget about that. And CEOs have a certain role and a certain persona. Doctors have often the persona of they like gods or treated as huge egos, and yet they've got families, they've got challenges, they've got health issues. So it's looking at the whole person, I think, for me, is the big thing. Leadership, and they're often technically brilliant, strategically brilliant. But I think what's often is missing is understanding themselves, the self-awareness, how to manage life balance, how to manage relationships. Sorry, that's a bit of a long story.
It's very interesting. It actually wasn't the answer I was expecting, so that makes it even better. But one of the things you mentioned was about being vulnerable in amongst all of those things. It seems that vulnerability is come up as a theme a lot over the last lot of interviews we've done, and certainly in some of the work I've been doing. How long do you think that's been? Is that always been a required trait of a CEO, or is it something that's specific for the modern leader?
I think probably it's always been there, but I don't think it's been recognized.
Right.
I think with the with the current challenges that we've had, the mental health challenges, I think with COVID, I think people have become, and I think it's a cultural thing as well. There's probably more for men than it is for women, if I may generalize. It could be a cultural thing. But I think the vulnerability is now much more required. People who can relate and be vulnerable themselves. So, and that's very difficult, to be vulnerable when you've got a huge responsibility, and it has been in the past seen probably more.
Yeah. So one thing I want to say is that vulnerability is a high risk. It can be high risk, can't it? So it can. But do you think it can backfire on you if you open open your kimono too far, so to speak?
Craig, Yes and no. I think it is about appropriate vulnerability. It's about the timing needs to be right. I think to bear it all, showing off for something like it would be absolutely inappropriate.
Yeah,
I think
sure.
it needs to have a purpose. But I think that I'm working with a current executive team where everybody is a specialist. They work in silos, and there's very little kind of real relationship with each other because they're just focusing on the outcomes. And so there's a yearning for relationships, the team, a partnership, and it's just very difficult. And part of it is because the CEO, who's a founder and very successful, is a driver, and so how to be more vulnerable is difficult.
Very
and
tough, right? Yeah.
I think it needs to be reciprocal. So you can't just have one person be vulnerable. But I think the CEO, she or he, kind of set the tone. And
That's the amount of people's lives that we've been let into now with the pandemic has changed dramatically, hasn't it? Like we now know about people's cats and dogs and their kids running around the house and the work environment or the living environments for people, which before that was sort of like siloed, wasn't it? So that vulnerability has changed a lot, hasn't it, for both sides?
And I think the other area is mental health. We don't talk about mental health. Our family struggled with one of our daughters going through a very dark period. And it was embarrassing. We didn't talk about that. Nowadays, it's much more acceptable. And that's part of the vulnerability, that it's okay to admit. And there are a lot of examples in business and society where it's important to talk about that and to be vulnerable.
It's astounding, isn't it? Like that is an open conversation these days, not relatively speaking, compared with quite a few years ago. It was just not discussed, was it? So it is increasingly. I want to change tack a little bit and talk about the role of the CEO is quite often between the board and the leadership team is in that role there. Let's talk about the leadership team for a minute. Culture and values and things like that are very important for an organization. How do you coach leaders, CEOs to get that, be on the same message through the leadership team and getting that multiplier effect?
Thanks for watching this video on Humanised Workforce Future You. Please leave a rating or review for the series on the medium where you source your videos.
The transcripts for today's video can be found on craigsafin.com. Please subscribe to the series to avoid missing out on future episodes.